Humanity is capable of absolutely incredible things. I mean, think about it. We have literally mapped the genome, split the atom, and completely conquered the skies. Today in this explainer, we are going to dive into the absurd, hilarious contrast between our modern technological brilliance and our historical tendency to walk willingly into wildly avoidable disasters. To really set the stage here, let's just look at our tech for a second. We actually designed the PlayStation's processing unit to handle an astounding 30 million instructions per second. 30 million! We built hyper-specialized hardware like the Geometry Transformation Engine, capable of rendering complex 3D worlds and calculating blistering perspective transformations on the fly. It totally proves that human brains are capable of absolute genius and meticulous planning. But historically, well, when we aren't busy building 32-bit powerhouses, we've repeatedly found ways to turn a fun afternoon into a high-octane delete button for our souls. When you look back through the centuries, our ancestors frequently displayed the survival instincts of a moth in a bug zapper. So let's look at 3 specific times history was just a series of very loud, very public oopsies. First up, the tasty train wreck of 1896 in Crush, Texas. Picture this. A railroad organizer named William Crush figured people loved disasters so much he should just go ahead and stage one. He creates a temporary town, heavily advertises a staged train collision, and 40,000 Texans actually show up to watch 2 metal behemoths smash into each other at 50 miles per hour. The expectation was this cool, controlled collision of decommissioned steam locomotives, and the public safety measures simply to stand back of it. That was literally it. Naturally, the reality was a bit different. When those trains hit, the boilers didn't just crumple, they violently exploded, launching red-hot shrapnel in every conceivable direction directly into the crowd. And the craziest part is how the audience reacted. The collision caused the boilers to detonate. At least 2 people instantly yeed their last haw, and dozens of others were severely injured by flying hunks of metal. You'd expect mass panic, right? Nope. Because humanity is built different. The surviving crowd didn't run away. They actually charged right toward the twisted metal to grab themselves souvenirs. They paid to see a wreck, and they were going to get their money's worth, completely ignoring the fact that they were standing in an active fragmentation zone. Number 2. The original backyard human in 18th century England. Now, if massive man-made explosions weren't your thing, the 1700s offered a totally different kind of bizarre psychological absurdity if you were a wealthy English elite. This was the era of the English landscape garden. But for some bored rich guys, stone and grass just weren't enough. Instead of buying a yacht, guys like banker Joseph Pocklington would literally hire a botanical bro to act as an ornamental garden hermit. Guys, this was a real paying profession. You were hired to be human lawn decor, a literal flesh-and-blood garden gnome placed in an artificial cave on some rich guy's estate. And the job requirements were absolutely unhinged. Pocklington demanded his hermit move into this artificial grotto and live there for 7 whole years. 7! During that time, absolutely no washing, no cutting your hair, and no cutting your nails. You were also strictly forbidden from speaking to any of the estate guests. The whole goal was for high society visitors to observe a human in his most natural state, which mostly just meant watching a very smelly, severely depressed guy endure a soul-crushing 7-year sentence of extreme filth. Why on earth would anyone do this? Well, if you miraculously survived this 7-year dirt nap without washing or speaking to a single soul, you'd be paid the modern equivalent of $100,000. So yeah, being a backyard hermit was essentially the 18th century version of a high-paying, intensely traumatic internship. Finally, number 3. The Fatal Dance Battle, better known as the Dancing Plague of Strasbourg in 1518. This right here is the absolute apex of absurd historical disasters. A localized fatal disease completely disguised as a raging party. It started in July 1518 when a woman named Frau Trophia walked into the street and started throwing it back for absolutely no reason. And she didn't stop. Days later, dozens of neighbors had joined this involuntary marathon. Soon, over 400 people were out there Beyblading themselves around the street. But up close, the dancers had empty, panicked expressions as if they were being puppeted by an invisible force, whipping their limbs until their feet bled. At the peak, 15 people were dancing themselves into a grave every single day from sheer physical exhaustion, heart attacks, and strokes.
And this brilliantly illustrates the genius of medieval medicine. Faced with a horrific mass casualty event where 15 people a day are dying from aggressive, non-stop dancing, the doctors took one look at it and confidently diagnosed the problem as a simple case of hot blood.
So, what do you do when hundreds of citizens are dying from hot blood? Well, city officials ruled out demonic possession and genuinely believed the victims just needed to, dance it out. To facilitate this, they actually built wooden stages in the streets and hired professional musicians to keep the tempo going. Instead of stopping it, they practically forced the victims to cha-cha slide into the great beyond. It took 2 whole months for this terrifying plague to finally burn itself out. So, let's wrap this up with a little future tech versus past stupidity, because perspective is everything. We complain a lot today, but the next time you're sitting on your couch stressing over the fact that your N64 architecture is suffering from excessive graphics pipeline stalls, disrupting your 3D rasterization, remember historical reality. Remember that at least you aren't a young girl in 10th century China getting your toes repeatedly broken and violently tucked under your sole just to achieve a 4-inch lotus foot. You actually get to walk normally without excruciating permanent disfigurement. And hey, if the existential threat of superintelligence and AI safety is keeping you up at night, just be grateful you don't live in 1692 Salem. Because back then, baking a cake made of rye flour and urine to cure a curse, or simply being just a little too strong and lifting a heavy musket, could get you convicted of witchcraft and hanged by your own paranoid neighbors. So yeah, humanity has come a really long way from human garden gnomes and 50-mile-per-hour train wrecks. Subscribe if you want to keep your feet bound only by socks, and leave a comment telling us which of these historical disasters you are most glad to have missed out on. I'll catch you in the next explainer.